I've been wanting to talk to you, man, for a long time. And actually, like, this conversation, we really should be doing in person, right?
I would agree.
And you were supposed to come down to Australia.
Yes, sir.
You're supposed to be here,
yes, sir.
What, around now?
Yeah, man, around now. There's a lot of things that got slowed down, obviously. But there was a couple international moves that were on the horizon. There was London in March that was well on the way. I was talking to some folks in Japan, and I was talking to you as well, and lining up some Australia situations, and honestly just taking things a little bit further beyond the geographic scope that I'm currently at right now. And what's interesting is how much more excited I am, especially with the catalog that's being built, to be able to double back, right? And still make those trips and still make those meaningful, worthwhile connections, and have that interpersonal relation. But now it's going to be on a completely different magnitude. So I'm super excited about that.
Before we get into it, because there's a lot of things that I know we're going to talk about. For the people listening, who is Greg Newman? Who are you? What do you do? Because I know you're a lot more than an artist, right? I think people pigeonhole you into just being a musician or an artist, or I know that's not necessarily everything you do or are.
Greg Newman is not only a performing and recording artist. Greg Newman is a human being. Greg Newman is an observer, a writer, an orator, and just really a thinker and a helper, right? I believe that as we continue to grow, and as I've continued to grow, I realize that my place is to assist people who might share the same principles or thought processes as me, to help them become stronger. And there's more than one way to do that. I think because of that very apparent lesson that was learned, it just makes the one-dimensional approach something that's a lot less enticing. Not only enticing, but in terms of just sheer effectiveness, right? You can't hit anything with one dimension, right? And so with the idea of, let me just do music and this other thing, it's like, okay, cool, we added the y-axis, but what would happen if we added a z-axis? And we looked at the depth at which things are working as well. And so I made a challenge for myself to say, let me take this as far dimensionally as I possibly can by not overcomplicating the situation, but move with intention. If you're going to add a dimension, then ensure that the idea is fleshed out. There's a level of authenticity to it, and that I'm not deviating from who I am as a person. So all those things. Yeah. And now so many words are who Greg Newman is.
What's your z-axis then? Like, because you talk about depth, like what does that actually mean to you?
I think there's different scopes and there's different compartments, rather departments, to the scope of an individual. I think there's whom they present to the world. I think there's how the world perceives them. And I think it's how the individual perceives himself would be that z-axis.
Right.
Because all those things play a very unique element and role in the strength at which a message can be conveyed, is not just looking outward, and not just worrying about how it's being, not even worrying, but being cognizant and being spatially aware as to how you're being perceived. But again, a lot of people aren't thinking about self throughout this rat race that we call keeping up with the ever dynamic and ever changing environment. Sometimes spatial awareness takes over, right? In that fight or flight, I need to be doing certain things at a certain tempo because otherwise it's going to nullify other departments. That's the Z-axis I created for myself is, you know what? Let me not forget who I am to myself and create too much ambiguation in the process of growth.
And that's a slippery slope, right? Because I think now it's never been easier to almost get away from your authentic self because there is so much on the other side being sold to people in regards to like fame, money, influence, power, these things that people crave intrinsically. And oftentimes to get to those things the quick way, people are like, well, they almost, they sell themselves, right? They change themselves. They're no longer the genuine, authentic self. How do you stay true to like being you when you could have every reason to, be another character who could maybe be more short-term successful? Short-term.
That's a great question. And I think it's a question that I became accustomed to asking myself, because every now and then we need to update the software that is our current mind state and our current perspective regarding where we are. You don't have the same build on the phone, PC, whatever you're using to be able to beam from your hemisphere to mine. That perspective, that update is new and it ever adapts. And I think there's this constant debugging that takes place, which is this asking self the question, how do I stay authentic? And so to kind of dive a little bit deeper and actually get to the root of what I believe keeps me balanced is I would originally overcomplicate the situation, which pulled me further away from the mark and the target domain that I really should have been focused on. And I realized I had to make things, at least for me, incredibly simple, because I have the propensity to want to look at every different angle. That's just how my mind's built. It's, I'm thinking about, okay, cool, this production sounds nice. Okay, I could see how a video would, with this tonality, okay, with this hue, who would shoot that? How much would that be? What location would that be? No, not that, not mountains, but maybe this and that. Okay, cool, but what would that budget be again? Okay, how long would it take me to haven't wrote one word? Right? And I had to pull myself back and say, although the intentions are pure, because mind you, wearing multiple hats for a certain period of time has the propensity to do that to you, because those aren't bad thoughts. Those aren't negative thoughts. All those components are very necessary. Every department is being utilized. But in order for me to tap into the most authentic self, I had to understand and clearly discern how to talk to myself to divide every single situation by 0. So the result constantly is the same, which is, do I enjoy what I'm doing? Is it fun? Because I found myself in this place where I was getting lost in the myriad of probability, right? If life and trajectory is the scatter plot, there's this innumerable amount of space that could be taken up by you constantly trying to project where things are. And I found myself getting lost in the probability of things instead of getting lost in the essence of doing the thing for the right reason.
Does that mean like getting caught in like the what ifs and the like the hypotheticals and the planning?
Yeah, of course. You know, because what I noticed was, back to one of the components or characteristics you mentioned, or I pulled and extracted from your question, was I'm an observer. So one thing that's assisted me with being able to reach for the most impact per square inch of record or video or content in general is looking left and looking right. I'm like, okay, so-and-so made that mistake. So-and-so didn't last that long. That record was okay. That record I'm not really feeling, but a bunch of people are feeling it. Why are they feeling it? I need to know why this has market value. Maybe it doesn't have artistic value in a certain way, but why does this have market value? Why does this have corporate value? Why are people ranting and raving about this project, but it's not getting any press? Why? So I'm looking at all these angles of things going on. And as you're taking in all that data, it's constantly skewing the best fit line on that scatter plot, right? Now, that's not to say that more data is bad. You want more information, but in terms of what information is useful in the moment in relation to where you are, that's where I was getting a little bit lost in the mist of, okay, this is the probability of the situation, but at the same time, we need to make the record first. Do you like it? If you're not playing it 1,000 times and on the 1,001st listen, you don't still think this record is drop dead amazing, then your super fan who might play it 1,002 times might think the same thing. So do it for them. So I have to put myself I have to be a super fan of self.
Wow.
First.
Interesting.
Right? Not to say that most folks won't play it 1,000 times, 500, 100 times. But as long as I am deeply in love with the work and having fun with it, then what's the ultimate purpose? And so that was my divisible by zero metric, I guess you could say, that has helped me streamline the process, right? So
is that every track for you? So every track you've released, you felt that way?
Or it's been a growing process.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. It's definitely been a growing process, because I'm not sure if you've been in this position, which I'm sure you had, because everything metaphorically is woven in and relates in similar ways. So it's finding yourself in this cycle of you doing the thing without you knowing you're doing the thing, right? I didn't know that I was making things very simple. I was just like, I really like this song. Like, I'm geeking out. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like jumping around in my room. Like, this is like seeing how it could translate live, understanding where the DJ can fill in words to create and generate the most hype to be able to build that 4D experience for people who are actually coming to the show, and take it from this audio, which already has impact sonically alone, and build upon that infrastructure. I was kind of doing it already. I just didn't know what I was doing. Right? So there's power that is to be extracted at a deeper level when I realize that the more I understand the room, the better I can navigate the room. Okay, now that I understand the dimensions of the room, perhaps now I can start furnishing the room. Perhaps now I can start organizing it. What atmosphere do I want? What's conducive to create the best material. And on top of that, material that's going to make me proud to stand by, and material that's also going to make the listener feel way more powerful and proud to stand by this thing and say, this is an extension of me. Because that's all Greg Newman, the artist, really is in comparison to Greg Newman, the observer, human being, the son, brother, these other components. It's Greg Newman, the artist, is times 10 of what Greg Newman, the person, is.
Well, he has to be, right?
Right. Because it's to your point, borrow your adjective, it's a slippery concept when you're putting ideas out to the world to be chopped down, potentially. It takes an unyielding amount of strength to say, I'm going to put a piece of myself out there. And that's why most people don't exude their real selves, because it's just simply this incredibly daunting thing. And so in order to strengthen self, I created this. It's like I'm sitting at a corporate meeting, and I look left and I look right, and I'm doing the song and dance, right? And then when it's time for me to leave, I go back in the back cave and I put my mask on, know I'm gonna kick guys in the neck.
It's like a persona. It's like you're a different person.
Because there's other things that need to be taken care of that aren't in the scope of the white collar thing.
Right.
And there's things that need to get done. That's not to say that people don't appreciate Batman, or appreciate or don't appreciate Bruce Wayne for all these things. But this duality, I think, exists in all of us. So what happens when you just confidently display it? And more so, instead of being preachy about it and telling and wagging the finger of you should or you should not, more so just like dividing it by zero, which is really one of the pillars that I'm standing by, of just make it extremely simple and just do it. Just do the thing.
Man, that is what, there's so many places to go from that. I mean, I'm curious your musical process, like how you take, because now you've gone from 1,000 times, this track has to be this level for me. But what is the musical process for you now when you have a track from the start? Where does that idea begin for music, and how has that changed over your years?
I would say that it's evolved. It evolves every time, because it's this ever adapting. It's like a plant. It's like when you're taking care of a plant and it's flourishing in this light, but sometimes you need to repot it.
Okay.
And sometimes you need to place it in a different direction.
Yeah.
Or sometimes the climate isn't conducive for where it's at, so it wilts. And you have to kind of find the right geography to make that one thing optimal, right? And so I found that when I treat my records, regardless of how they sound, as these very delicate things that have the potential to lose their wind or wilt, right, in the hands of someone else. Because when I give it to you, it might just wilt, right, without the basic resilience, without it being rooted to something. So for my process, it starts off from really where a lot of the story began for me, which was I didn't really have songs in the beginning. I had poems. And I would read these poems to myself, read these poems to maybe friends who would be open to listen. And this is when I was 16, 17. It's probably back in 07. And 07, 06. And I found myself in this place where a lot of the early beginnings for me were performative. And it was this way of getting things out. And so now, fast forward, when I do listen to something, it has to move me physically first. Whether it is this, wow, this is a very passionate string progression, and it brings out this emotion. And what I mean move bodily, it doesn't mean crazy muddy 808, I'm going to scream on this thing. Although that could be the number one combo with cheese. You already know what it is.
Cool.
But for the most part, it's this, whoa, this makes me think of a movie scene. This makes me think of what a movie, this feels cinematic. This feels larger than life. And that's what I think music should be. And that's where I would love my music to sit in the hearts of people, because that's where it sits for me, is this. When I'm listening to Greg Newman, I feel limitless, because I would love people to take from it what I inject from it, and what eventually it reflects back on me. Because when I hear it, I'm like, wow, I feel limitless, because I'm hearing these pieces of ideas that I never thought were there in such pure form conveyed back to me. It's like when you're a teacher and you rewatch your lecture and you're like, wow, I really did that.
Yeah.
That's like, it's almost like you jumped out of your body. But to get to your question, because I don't want to deviate too far off the mark here, the process for me is, does it move me sonically?
Okay.
Because whether or not people really understand what they're doing, pre-COVID, there's people who listen to strictly dance hall, strictly techno, strictly house. People are going to festivals to listen to DJs, and beyond sample chops, you're paying $300 to go to whatever festival to listen to beats.
Right.
Which most people wouldn't take a step back and look at the macro and say, that's what's really taking place, which is a powerful, extremely important thing, because some vocalists, songwriters, orators would swear up and down like it's the performance. If you're not Adele, then you don't. No, stop. It's the production. It starts there. It's like an outer ring of people. If everyone's in this circle, you have everyone listening to the way the song makes them feel. And then you have an inner ring that cares about what's being said in general, the flow perhaps. And then you have an inner ring who's like, what is he actually saying within the context of this flow, within the context of this production? So I start from the outer ring and I work my way inwards.
Yeah.
And so that's what helps me at least begin the story, because I say, okay, this feels melancholy. This feels rain on the window pane. This feels like I'm an underdog. This feels like sun to the face, wind to the back. I can do anything. I'm going to tell a story about me doing anything. I'm going to live it. So.
And just so you know, your music, you say, what was that word you used? Limitless. Your music definitely has that energy. It's, I would say, powerful, right? It embodies and imbues a huge amount of powerful energy that, physically absolutely moves a guy like me, because I use your music to fuel, for example, workouts, hard trainings, right? And I think you're aware of that. I think because it physically can drive you, and so I think you're absolutely achieving that vision.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And there's more pieces. There's more pieces to. There's layers to it, because I think we're all very complex. We're all very complex beings, and it's very important to see, how would this music playing in the background inspire the MLG gamer to get the highest KD he or she could possibly get.
You think about that.
How would this? Because I love video games. I'm a nerd, so I think of all the things I'm interested in. And I'm like, I'm really making music for people whom felt less to feel everything.
Yeah.
I'm making music for us. Like, as weird as it says, I mean, as weird as it sounds, like, I'm making music for those people, which is why it hits them on a certain frequency. Because I'm like, no, I was 17-year-old asthmatic kid, never played a sport until I was 17, then I had chronic asthma, allergic to everything, like picked last on the team, laughed at. I was that kid. Regardless of whatever it looks like, I was that kid wishing I could say the things I was saying now. So what am I doing now? Making records so that 16-year-old kid today can blast that out of his car or her car and say, this is, there was one line that Donald Glover or Childish Gambino had in one record. He was like, I make music for whack blacks to blast back. And it was like, it's beyond color, but it's like, it's one of those things. I keep certain things in mind. I'm like, yeah, this is for people trying to be a higher version of themselves at some point. You don't have to have a cardinal direction, but you just know that there's something more to this thing. And if the music that's being made could at least provide some friction and spark some level of ember towards the tinder that you set, which is the potential opportunity of something to be ablaze within you, then I am more than happy to do everything I possibly can, because people's reactions to it, my reactions to my own records set the tinder and strike the flame for me. So
that's a powerful intention. I wonder what you talk about when you were a kid. Like, how did you transform yourself? Because you seem and appear and speak and communicate like a very well-spoken, confident, but calm and assertive individual. And I know, because you're describing a version of myself back, like timid, introverted, weak, just pick last on the team too, right? And so that's why I think I resonate as well on a deeper level. But what was your hero's journey where you could transform yourself into Greg Newman today? Like, why didn't you stay that person? Because so many people just stay that guy, right? The girl stays weak and introverted and just a shell of themselves.
Right. Well, it's always easier said than done. But what I realized was what I perceived as weakness was not necessarily weakness. It was just uncertainty woven in the fabric of what one might perceive to be weak or one might perceive to be fearful. When you can't visualize what the next step looks like, forgive them for they not know what they do is a idiom, saying that's used. But it's when people notice something different, they happen to detest this thing simply because it's something that A, they're not willing to understand, or B, it's something that they simply don't understand after they have applied that time and attention to try to understand that thing. So if we're looking inward and outward from within ourselves, and we see, dang, I don't know or understand or have the time to understand what this other version of me could look like, I am simply afraid. And I'm simply worried that because I see someone over there who is an exact representation, because when we can't find it internally, we look externally, right? We look left and look right and say, which one of these, because we're looking for this reference point, right? We're looking for some way to associate, okay, well, not maybe as much as so-and-so, but maybe just a little bit less than so-and-so, but definitely more than so-and-so. So we're finding these reference points to try to hit some certain mark. And I found that being in a place of uncertainty barred me from taking action. But what changed a lot of things for me was, for instance, the first example being having this chronic asthma. I was trying out for the track team when I was like in 6th grade. And I had never really ran before this. I think we were doing the 800 at the time. And I remember working to do the first 400 with the group, 400 meters with the group. And started running, and I was definitely in the back, let's say. And then the group started getting that gap. And then I was like, okay, I got to turn it up. So I started trying really as hard as I can, which might be, equivalent to a full sprint, let's say. And I'm catching up and I'm catching up and I'm catching up. So we're almost done with this 400. And then I wake up in the grass because I passed out.
Whoa, damn.
And I had my inhaler in the backpack, next to the track. And it was just one of those things where, you hit a wall, right? Not only a physical wall, respiratory wall, but a mental wall, which only stokes the flame of that uncertainty and stokes the flame of that fear. Like, see, this is why you don't do this. You don't do this because you're not good enough.
Yeah.
You don't do this because you're not capable. So stop trying to do things you're not capable of. Check this off your list, or scratch this off your list, because this is never going to be complete. I let certain circumstances like that solidify the idea that self-worth wasn't as high as what it really is, which is really this untapped well. So to round out the conclusion of it, I simply just did it again. I took an advanced physical education course, 17, met a guy, cool guy. He said, hey, let's work out. Cool. Him and I liked other things, video games, whatever. Cool guy. We were in a couple classes. And he was like, yo, we're in the same class, let's run. Him and I are always pacing each other. And then I realized, I'm like, man, I'm not nearly as physically unable as I once was. You grow, right? And 12th grade or year 12, a little bit different than year 6, right? So physically, I was just a little bit different. I had the capacity to lift weights. So then him and I got into powerlifting. And then I realized, whoa, I ran a mile and I'm in front of this class and I'm pacing with this other guy and we're killing it. And yes, I'm tired. Yes, I need my inhaler. I need to run with it. But I just did something I didn't even think was possible. Just because having that person to push you, or having a reference point at the time to not tell you what you're capable of, but to help you help yourself. And at the time, I didn't know that's what it was. At the time, I was like putting all of those gems or that responsibility or that worth in someone else's hands, which is a deeper thing, right? But because I think we have the propensity to give people credits that we could probably store for ourselves, because it's not like he's running for me. He's running for himself, right? And I'm just simply adding to the value, adding value to the table by not lacking, so he can consistently be a high quality version of himself as well and push himself. So long story short, I went and I ran 1 mile and I was like, okay. And then it turned into 3, and then it turned into 10, and it turned into this, I'm addicted to this, what can't I do? Because at the same time, poems turned into freestyles with the homies at the kickback. that were probably all trash. If I go back and watch that time, right, as we all think back to that time, which turned into karaoke, which turned into now I'm at an open mic at a cafe, which turned into I've never wrote a song, so I'm doing covers, which turned into, I wrote my first song, and or then I recorded my first song. Here's what my voice sounds like. I hate it.
Yeah, of course. Everyone's
right,
like that.
yeah. It's like, okay, this is what people have been hearing for the last whatever.
They
say, I was okay. This I can tell all y'all really love me. This is horrendous. This is. I would never live this. This is you guys are psychopaths. I would never do this.
Oh,
and so that was really the premise, is that I had to just try to surprise myself, because when I tried to surprise myself, I surprised myself. And all I needed, everyone's personality structure is a little bit different, but I am known, at least in my friend group, and the people who know me in my life, to be a little bit hyper optimistic. I don't like to think that things aren't possible, and I don't have a tendency to surround myself around people who are first to tell me why things aren't possible and provide concrete reasons. Like, for instance, I have no problem someone presenting an alternative counter idea to my idea, because I think the premise of growth is what I mentioned before, which is that friction. If I throw an idea out, in order to get it to a point where it's more dense and more solid and more rigid, your objective is to break it, not dissimilar to muscle fibers when you're working out. Things must be destroyed in order to be reformed in a more solidified way. So I present a concept, you break it, and then I would counter that and say, well, actually, I can understand why you think this is not valid, but here, let me provide other counterpoints as to why this is valid. And through this deliberation, we can agree to disagree, we can agree to agree, or whatever the case is. I can say, wow, I didn't see that perspective. Let's go with your method. So there's a lot of different components to it, but I find myself as somebody whom is, again, dividing everything by zero and saying, all right, let's do it. Because I'm willing to do it 1,000 times. I'm willing to fail 1,000 times. Like, I'm in the place in my life where I'm like, man, what if I come into the room and I immediately tell myself I'm overqualified for the position of whatever the vacancy is? And what happens when I surprise myself and I am overqualified? Okay, now what's the surplus, and how can that surplus add value? What is that value? And start from there. And again, keep things really simple. The back of house might be a lot really complex, a lot of gears turning, but the face might look like just a watch ticking.
Interesting. When you wrote your first track, because you said the step by step, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was that moment and story of you writing your first track? Because that's a pretty formative moment, right? Through every artist's career and life. What was that track? Is that released, or is that just a personal thing?
I don't think it's released. I feel as though the first remnants of records that we make are, like I was mentioning before, are pseudo reference points from the things that you're listening to.
Yeah, like inspirations.
Right. So we are byproducts of societal mimicry in micro and macro ways. So with that, it's, what am I listening to? Okay, well, I'm listening to Lil Wayne, and I'm listening to Kanye West, and I'm listening to Common, and I'm listening to Jay-Z, and I'm listening to Nas. Okay, and I'm listening to Eminem. Okay, so you're this combinatory medley of things. But I remember I was doing an internship when I was 16, at this tech company, and I was in the quality assurance department, and it was incredibly boring. I love tech. I'm definitely like a software hardware like nerdy. Oh, what's the GPU? What's the
Mm-hmm.
and I'm definitely that guy. But just running scripts all day was a little bit different than what I was expecting, especially with the the tacit and dynamic memory of a 16-year-old, and where I would just get bored immediately. I'm like, I want to go home and play Halo.
Yeah.
Fuck people up. So like, yeah, can we just do that? Can we just mop a bunch of kids from the other side of the world online? But basically, running all these tests, I would listen to a lyric, and then I would try to find that beat, and then I would find that beat, and then I would use the same cadence and replace the words.
Right.
Right.
That's
so you take something like I don't know, a Millie, Lil Wayne,
that's
Fireman, Go DJ. You take certain things and you say, well, let me start here because I really like this song.
Yeah.
Right. I'm really enjoying the song. Let me see what I could do, and it became this, okay, cool. Like, I wrote the lyrics in like a Word document, printed it out. Shows you how nerdy I was. I printed it out, faxed it to no, I was kidding. Faxed it to the homies. But he printed it out, and I brought it and I spit it for one of my friends, and he's like, yeah, you sound exactly like Lil Wayne.
Of course though.
And I was like, well, does that make it bad?
Yeah, right. It's still dope though.
Does that make it bad? He's like, no. He's like, oh, you might have something. I was just like, all right, it sucks. I know.
When they go high pitched like that, then it's like, shit,
Yeah. I was like, well, gotta burn it right now. But yeah, it became one of those things where I began finding my comfortability because I realized, not dissimilar to the, I've ran this distance, or I've taken this class and I did well. I didn't expect to do well, and on top of that, there's a lot of things that, again, there's a lot of chains being broken here. There's a lot of I look the way I do, but I don't speak the way someone who looks the way I do might speak.
Yes.
And so thus I'm like breaking and cracking a lot of things simultaneously at the same time, which is stoking the flame of possibility in my mind to say, I'm not only surprising other people, but I'm surprising myself. So let me try out this flow. Let me mimic this. Let me mimic that. Let me mimic this. This is different from that. And so now I'm getting into the technicality of things, because I was always raised to kind of be a left brain person. I was groomed by my parents to kind of be a in the tech world.
What did your parents do?
To be, my mother was a nurse's assistant at the time growing up, and she was born in Kingston, Jamaica, so she was an immigrant. And my dad was born in Birmingham, England. His parents were from Jamaica as well, so it kind of all reroutes back to the West Indies. But he was in tech as well, as a PM or project manager. And so he would always have me proofreading emails to his business colleagues and saying, does this make sense, grammatically? And granted, it did need to be pure edited at times, but I think it was more so a test for me to kind of get my chops up, right? To understand the composition of an email, to understand how Microsoft PowerPoint works, to understand, okay, this is the spreadsheet. And although I don't know how to do all these different things with it, I'm at least familiar with this thing. I'm familiar with a Word document. The following year, when I was 17, I went back to that tech company, and instead of working in the quality assurance department, I worked in the dev department to see if I liked that a little bit better. And I started learning the remnants of a C# programming language. And I was just being given small activities, nothing too crazy. I was doing like minor debugging, but It was just something that I realized that, um, man, who would expect someone who looked like this to do this thing?
Mm.
So I, yeah, I found myself in the place where I was starting to realize that the technicality that also exists, not only within tech, not only within um, the complexity of relationships with other people, the complexity of relationships with your parents, the complexities of relationships with yourself, also mirrored the complexities within these stories and narratives that were being told. Even though I couldn't necessarily connect with some of the street stuff that was going on, because my parents made an incredible effort to keep me in tutoring groups, to keep me in a book, to keep me. I mean, if I wasn't assigned something from school, my parents would assign me a book report project over the summer. Like every summer, there was something I had to complete, a paper I had to write. I was just always being pushed with academics and also being pushed with staying inside. So I started becoming accustomed to building my own interests and building my own like worlds,
Yeah.
within the context of just my room. And that's just kind of what helped with the process, because I started noticing, okay, these people are telling stories and they're bringing me into this world. What's the depth of a story? You know, is it like what components are being utilized? Is it just the production? Is it what they're saying? Is it their flow? Is it tonality? Is it the way he cracked his vocals at 2 minutes and 36 seconds that makes me believe that what he's saying moved him to the point where that was natural? Was it unnatural? Was it staged? I just started getting into the small minutia of things. And what's wild is that when you do that in one compartment or one department of your life or one section of your life, you start to realize how many other things mirror that section, which is why I ended up weaving in my appreciation for being outside, my appreciation for the freedom that being outside provided, the appreciation of my father and I used to go out and we used to take pictures of sunsets.
Really?
We used to go on drives. And because I was like I'm also like a super car enthusiast nerd as well. So I have, I'm building a 1999 Subaru Forester Coupe RS that I'm going to swap a STI engine into, but we can
Really?
get into that later.
Man,
I'm weird, man.
Bro, that's not weird. That's cool to me.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. A lot of people aren't into cars and stuff, so it's like people wouldn't understand, you know, the interest in that. But I love cars. I'm a Fast and Furious baby, Fast and Furious 1, you
Same.
know, and you know, it's like one of those things that I Need for Speed as well, early
Yep.
ones, and I find that there were certain things, again, these worlds that were being built not only existed in a literary sense, but they also existed, you know, in this in these other spaces. So yeah, I just found that being a little bit more focused on how things became more tranquil inspired, you know, my father and I to go on these drives and, you know, drive up to like the nearest highest area in the neighborhood or a hike or a mountain or whatever, and take these pictures. And it was just something, maybe it was just father-son time, but it drew so much more for me because it just showed me how small I was in comparison to this amazing thing that I didn't understand,
Right.
which was the power of nature.
Yeah.
And so when it came to me crafting what I felt as though would be my journey within the context of music, it's looking left and looking right and looking around and seeing what other people are doing, why other people are doing it. But at the same time, how does the music feel? And I felt as though every story that everyone has is in some form or another larger than life. A lot of the lessons we learn are larger than life in some form of context. And the lessons that we derive are all reflections of the experiences that we've had. So with that being considered, I came up with the concept, and really it's more of a pillar that I have in terms of principles that I have in my life, but it's now we mirror nature, which is really a acrostic poem of my last name phonetically.
Yes.
Right.
Newman.
So yeah.
I want to talk about this because I know nature is like has symbology with your name and your music and your persona and who you are. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Explain. Keep going, please.
Oh yeah, not a problem. I don't want to see. Here's the thing, man. I don't want to sit here and just ramble on for hours.
It's really interesting.
I really.
Please go.
I really yeah. Feel free to pull up anytime, but and cut it off. But basically, yeah, I just realized that what would it feel like to make a record that felt this powerful?
Yeah.
How close could I get? Sometimes if the planet is the first artist,
yeah,
and inspired the first person to do the first cave painting based on their experience, perhaps we're just reflections and refractions of this thing, this cycle that we call life. And perhaps we can find ourselves in a place where some information and further value can be derived, because then what if we could control these reflections and refractions? And so I scaled it back. I was like, okay, there's levels to this, because I like conceptual things. I like things, and I realized, and I was attracted to artists that when I listened to their records, I would go back and a metaphor would be 3 layers deep, and it would come off simple. It would come off very simple. And then you think about it, and you're like, actually, if I think of it in this context, whoa, it worked there. And I weaved it with that line, with this line, this is something completely different. And it was those things that made me realize that the foundation of any business to bring in where, and the mentality in which I was raised, you need a solid, multi-dimensional foundation that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Like Coca-Cola can mean it's cold. Polar bear is another metaphor. Polar bears are in the cold. Our drinks are cold. Oh, you can put ice in it. Glaciers are ice. So we're going to use that as a metaphor to say that our drinks are cold. What happens with ice on a hot day? Well, that means it's refreshing. So technically, if I have a polar bear in this commercial, then I'm alluding to the fact that this drink is actually refreshing, but it's actually just sugar and chemicals.
No, it's so like deep. That's interesting. The symbology and meaning.
So, yes. And so what I was really scraping the surface of, without me really understanding that, was semiotics and the study of signs and the actual study of symbology. And so I found myself in a place where it became this much deeper, much denser, much more, I guess you could say, impactful thing that brought me to a place where I realized if my first step began with some level of density where it could mean something for someone else, then perhaps I could find myself in a place where it could be bigger down the line. And regardless of what angle you look at this thing from, it can mean something different for you. Whether it's, I'm here for the music, I'm here for, and this is where we're creating the dimensions in terms of the graph, right? This is where it's, are you here for, why would people want to even hear what Greg has to say? Why would it, like looking at the mirror, like why would anyone care?
What's your answer to that?
At all?
Or does it not matter, maybe? Or maybe it does. Like, how do you reconcile that?
Well, I don't think personally there is anything more relatable than you being unapologetically a human being who makes mistakes and is learning. What is more relatable than someone trying to figure it out? The only thing is that it's like an electric vehicle. right? Everyone's trying to figure things out, but I can do it in a couple ways. I could say, hey, what's going on, guys? My name is da da da, and this is the hyper motivational thing that you can do.
Mm-mm.
Or I can make it sexy, and you can drive around in a Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm still working to save the planet, right? But it's the way it's packaged that makes it palatable and digestible for people.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of me being in your face and saying, we probably shouldn't cut down trees and all these emissions with these CO2 gases, with the greenhouse. Instead of doing that, it's now we mirror nature. Here's a record that's not only going to have the name that alludes to weather. I'm going to put weather in the video.
Yeah.
My name is going to sound, or my tonality is going to sound thunderous.
Yes.
My shows are going to have these feelings or these emotions stirring within them that look like a force of nature. So what happens when you're embodying a force that cannot be stopped? This unyielding thing that cannot be stopped. What happens when you're on stage and you're performing and mosh pits look like cyclones? Like there's just things that I'm looking at that I'm like, you know, it's multi-layered. But what happens when you release a merch line and 50% of all profits and proceeds are going to that environmental effort because the world's on fire in this corner of the globe?
Yeah.
And you're helping to source water over here and do these other initiatives, where every stream is offsetting carbon emissions in the atmosphere, depending upon what partnerships and sponsorships that you have, right? I'm working on creating a level of authenticity, but at the same time, just telling stories and just being myself. And I don't have everything figured out, but at the same time, I know that just because I haven't necessarily ran a marathon yet, that I'm not incapable of doing so. So my focus to redirect that was, if I'm a reflection of my environment, then maybe we're all mirrors.
Right.
And maybe when you look at me, there's a high possibility, not you implicitly, but the general public, whoever's coming in contact with me, it's, why am I listening to Greg? Am I listening to Greg or this artist because of the song or the way he's saying it, what he's saying, he or she is saying, their production choice, their live show, what they stand for? How many different dimensions is that artist creating for you to get lost in? Yeah. When you're playing a video game and you walk down the hallway and it says for you to go up and right.
Yeah.
And then you realize there's a room to the left. Why would that developer make that room to the left? There's got to be an achievement in there. I'm going to get it.
Oh, are you the same? I'm the same. I got to go through all of it.
I have to go through all of it.
I can't not know, right? I want to know. It's just this insatiable like curiosity and like I don't know if it's for you, but for me, it's like I need to fully complete something. I don't want to have 98% done. Motherfucker, you finish the whole thing.
You tell me at chapter 4, step 37, I missed. Okay.
Damn it!
So it's one of those things.
I gotta go back.
Right. So the metaphor that comes to mind, at least right now, is that content creators are developers. So what happens when I am creating this map with checkpoints for people to go through, and the map is my brand.
Yeah.
And the checkpoints are the music, are these other components, is the apparel, is the tacit, is the theological, is the ideological. So how many different caveats can I create for people to silently fall into? If this is an RPG and you say a certain thing or you go a certain direction, how does that story splinter off? Because some people might just get lost in, oh, this is how he's environmentally or anthropologically thinking about the world, and they're like, I really don't even listen to Greg's music anymore. I'm just more so on like what books he's reading, or like what components of like what podcasts does Greg listen to, or what are these other, or what stage is his car at? Like people are in it for, people are in it for whatever they're in it for, but it's like create those pockets for that interest to exist.
I wonder, because nature, and I can see the plants in the background, like, I can see the music, right. the persona, the acronym. Like, do you think if it wasn't for your father taking you to go to those mountains and see those sunsets, that you wouldn't have this deep connection and root with nature? Or is there some other things that occurred too throughout your life that gave you that?
That's a great question. I think those specific moments definitely played a significant part, but I also believe that having parents that, and this is really the most pivotal role of having those guardian figures in your life, is that, no one's perfect. I think everyone understands that no one's perfect, but at the same time, they made a point to ensure we're gonna go see your family in New York. We're gonna go see your family in the UK. We're gonna go see your family in Jamaica. We're gonna try to take a family vacation out here to do this, and that at these locations. We want to have fun over here. Maybe we can rent a jet ski or something like that. Maybe we can do these other small things to be able to create this level of wonder. But throughout that, you're also seeing extreme poverty as a kid. So I've always had this not only genealogical kind of global thing about me, like I'm literally a composite of people from all over the place.
True.
But at the same time, it's having this global perspective as a kid that the world is bigger than not only my room or my backyard or just down the street or my neighborhood or my school. It's the idea of like, there are other types of people out there. And from the perspective of these other types of people being out there, it destroys certain barriers that exist. Like a lot of my best friends were, Indian kids, like these different. It was like, but it had nothing to do with that. It was like you like Ratchet and Clank too. I love Ratchet and Clank. You like Jack and Daxter. I love Jack and Daxter.
Hold on. Did you actually play those games? Because those games are some of my favorite nostalgic.
Oh, come on, man.
Wow.
Come on, man.
Oh, bro, we could talk about that for an hour.
Yeah, of course. Of course, man. It's like, and these are the things that like I immediately saw through, these certain things where people would otherwise just bar you and say, like, whoa. No. You look this way.
Yes.
We're not playing that. So, in a way, it became this thing where, and again, I don't want to splinter off too far from your question, but it brought me to a place where I felt as though being a global minded kid, being interested in music that came from the UK, being interested in music that I was raised with. I wasn't allowed to listen to hip hop growing up because my parents were like, no, never in life. Are you crazy? No, never in life. And so I grew up listening to reggae and calypso music and R&B and Luther Vandross and Mary J. Blige and just a bunch, just oldies. And, it's one of those things that had shaped my understanding of like culture. And there's different cultures. So then I would go over to the Indian homie's house and then his mom's cooking a certain dish that's native to their culture. And those things break down the walls of nature can take many forms. So what happens when in a record, I'm not only talking about and creating allusions and reference points towards environmental nature, but what happens when I'm conveying the vulnerability of what one might associate towards human nature.
And that's where you take that next step well beyond just physical nature, but the biology and the experience of what it is to be a human being.
That's correct, because we're talking about dimensions that have a crazy level of complexity.
Right.
We're talking about places that that have a lot to draw from. And when it came to starting all of this, realizing how kind of light some bases, some artists kind of build initially, my focus at least, because I mean, an artist can drop an amazing song and have an amazing story, which I think everyone has an amazing story, but an artist can drop just an amazing song and then boom, magic happens. They're on their auntie's Beyonce. It's done. So it's like, those situations happen, all the time. And that's perfectly fine because those are also beautiful situations. My focal point is sustainability. And it's also sustainability, but not being, hey, I'm a Toyota Camry, we're going for 300,000 miles. I want to make it a little bit more interesting.
Right.
I want to make it so, we're having fun throughout this thing and we can be as dynamic as we possibly can be. Because I'm one person for the time being, operating at a bandwidth where I have to still execute a lot of different things personally on my own. Of course, there's going to be ideas that I come up with that maybe some other artist has come up with. No, what they say, nothing is new under the sun.
Yeah.
Right. So it's one of those things where, sure, we're all going to draw and kind of create these mutations or adaptations, off of different contexts or off of different concepts. But at the same time, what happens when you do everything you possibly can to not only create this depth, but create a large enough spread to the point where you're marketable to anyone? Because you're just talking about the most relatable thing on the planet to the people whom you're talking to, which is the human experience.
I think Drake does a great job at that. I think his ability to communicate to everybody, like everybody has a song, like, the girls in the club, the guys who just broke up with their girl, or even the hood guy who, is in the ghettos and is really struggling. Like his ability to speak to everybody, I think, is one of the biggest reasons he is successful from like a global level, on a connection level.
Mm-hmm. And it just goes to show you, that's a great point. And Drake is amazing at what he does. And that's one of the reasons why, a lot of artists may not necessarily be thinking about, stopping power when it comes to what they're conveying. Because even if you think of the density of the brand, you're thinking like, dang, OVO, October's very own, this and that, his birthday. There are some caveats, but like the depth isn't really kind of, it's not crazy, mind-boggling.
No.
You're putting Falcon Heavy on Mars.
Right.
It's like, it's not this crazy, unimaginable depth, but look to show, like, but take a look and see how powerful words are without that depth. Right? When the orator and the songwriter and the person whom is conveying those messages understands what they're great at, which is another characteristic that a lot of artists and a lot of people, when I say artists, I mean creatives on every single medium. I'm talking about painters and sculptors and contractors and podcasters and performing artists and jazz players. It's like when you realize and understand your power within your space, that's when your creativity and your core becomes so much more focused, when you know what you're doing and why it works. So for instance, and these are kind of like the rules and concepts that a lot of folks may not consider coming into the game, but something I had to learn to consider is, if you had a checklist, if you're creating a My Player, what categories are 99 and what categories aren't? What categories do we have? What things does Greg Newman have in the tool belt to be able to showcase and sell myself and prove my point and validate my point, right? Back to the conversation of if the fans are the people trying to break the idea that you're presenting to the world, that's what people do. They'd say, hey, that song sucks. Actually the song's great. It just went over your head. And this is why. It's this break and resolidification kind of toggle, right? So the idea is that what things do I bring to the table that work that enable me to present myself in the highest form. And to bring it back to Drake, it's like he understands I may not be freestyle guy. I may not hit every single one of these radio stations and drop 64 bars in each one of you motherfuckers until y'all understand that I'm the number one freestyle king. It's just like, you understand that he feels as though he doesn't have to indulge in certain things, but it's not this pompous, I'm better. It's this, Busta Rhymes knows exactly what he needs to do to be able to perform a show at the maximum effort because he understands what it's going to take to be able to do what he does. And it's the same thing with Kendrick. It's the same thing with Cole. It's the same thing with all the greats. It's the same thing with Jay-Z. It's the same thing with everyone before them, right? KRS, whatever, LL Cool J, everybody. So it's about knowing what you can do. And I had to just really ask myself, you know, hey, what are these things? Is it, why would people rock with me the most? Is it the show? Is it the tonality? Is it the interview aspect? Because hearing people listening to a record and then coming to an interview, they might be like, what?
Yeah. It's like
no, I wanted this guy to yell at me.
Yeah, right. Do you get that?
Like, no. I mean, well, what's funny is that there's this component of my career and infrastructure isn't as fleshed out as records. Of course. Isn't as fleshed out as performances. So because of that, this is a very intermediate, people might see this and this might be a lot of people's first experience.
For sure.
You know, to seeing what could potentially be their understanding of me on a personal level.
And then they might hear your records, right? And they might trip out because be like, what? Such a contrast.
Right. But I think that's creating the space for that contrast to exist.
Yes.
Creating as many of those categories as possible. Is it tonality? Is it interviews? Is it what they stand for? Is it how they do it? Is it the performance? Is it, you know, when he's sitting down having a conversation? Is it when he's on Twitch and he's playing online, he's just this completely different person? Depending upon how many levels that you create are really how many different directions the story and narrative can go into. And it's just creating pockets for people to appreciate you for different caveats. It's like, oh, because he likes cars, or because it's like the more things I create, the more probability, the wider net. You know, I'm not necessarily worried about catching one specific type of fish. I like to capture fish that understand what I'm talking about. Because the one thing is that what you also run the risk of is running the risk of hyper generality, right? If you catch so many fish to the point where, you know, you seem as though there's this pandering, right? You're pandering to this larger demo where everything is hyper safe is the word that comes to mind, right? And so all I'm doing is I'm creating these caveats, but I still have reason to believe that content that comes from my side of things still has this niche edge to it, where if you're not necessarily in a position where you don't think there's another level that could be ascended to, or you're not trying to get better, the music might not be for you. And that's perfectly fine. But what I'm talking about is that the concept and the idea that I would assume most people are like, there's other stuff to be done. And as long as I straddle the line of, I'm trying to inspire people, I'm trying to inspire those uninspired, and I'm trying to further inspire those inspired. Right. I'm focused on that. I'm focused on that side of the spectrum.
I wonder, because like we alluded to and talked about before, how you communicate who you are, who you embody, is not the stereotypical black man, right? And for me, in my own way, I identify with, well, you know, when people look at me, they might feel certain ways, and like dreads, beard, mixed race, like, who am I, right? The background I've come from and who I've become now. And I can sense that maybe you've had your own experience where, you know, have you had resistance with like being a certain type of person, like the stereotypical, black man in society versus who Greg Newman has become. And because you don't carry yourself, I think, in the way that some people might pigeonhole your appearance to be. Have you had resistance with that?
I 100%, without a doubt. I think everyone has, in some form or fashion, has some level of resistance with figuring out who they are.
Yeah.
And you try to do this thing. Culturalization is the word that comes to mind. In order to survive, we do everything we possibly can to blend into our environment and become this chameleon.
Yeah.
Right. So I found myself in a place where I very quickly realized that there was something different. But my mom was around my dad for a long time, and my dad has an English accent. So I'm already starting off on this very thin ice. I'm already coming in, shirt, polo tucked into the slacks with the tennis shoes. I was coming in strong. I was coming in flagrant with the hey, this is me. These are the clothes my mom laid out for me in the morning, because if I don't wear these clothes, she's just gonna beat me, and you never received a beating from a West Indian woman, and I'm not going through that because I need to sit down for all these periods in class, and I just can't sit down if I'm just getting beat. So basically, I found myself in this place. Where I knew that I knew early from the jump that, okay, there's that. My parents told me sit in the front of the class, raise your hand, answer questions, engage. So I didn't think there was anything wrong with that until I got clowned for it.
Yeah.
Until all of a sudden I realized, like, okay, this is not something that's attractive to anyone. And then it kind of fooled me for a period of time into thinking that it wasn't attractive to me. So, doing everything you can to switch up the way you talk, you walk, you dress, to try to suppress some of that tension, became a point of focus for me. And I think from that period of time moving forward, it became this, you're applying this one level of pressure in one section of your life in terms of assimilation. And then once I realized that no matter what I can do, because I had a problem, but I had a focus around trying to keep everyone happy, because I didn't like people not to like me.
Yeah.
Right. I felt like I was already applying so much pressure on myself internally because of the things I was able and not able to do, that I didn't want to have additional external pressures as well. So I was trying to be very agreeable and very hey, we're all good. And on top of that, it's like learning and understanding very vividly that, okay, I understand I'm that very weird, quiet black kid in the corner whom is masking this fear and this uncertainty in comedy. So it's like, oh, Greg's super funny, or, oh, he's the first person to diffuse a situation, and put himself in a place where like he's very approachable, very, very peaceful, very, very easygoing, so I found myself in this place where it became this other thing. And that's why I learned that once I created that shield, that there was other shields that I also had created. And after a while, not shields is a better word for it, perhaps more relevant, I created these other masks. And so it became this Rolodex of masks that I could access at any point and pull out, depending upon what the situation was, to not only shield myself from the potential harm of being in a scenario or being in an environment that might not accept me for who I was, but also to provide some closure or clarity to the other people in the scenario to say, hey, I'm not a threat. And it was this protective dual purpose kind of thing.
Yeah.
So as I built up all these different sub personas, which were all still me, but sections of me and not revealing the full context, it's a lot of work. So yeah, of course, there's people who didn't look like me who were like, nah, you're a black guy. You can't swim in my pool. Like my mom's not gonna, yeah. And so like, and then there was also, you know, people who look like me who were like, nah, you're not us. Yeah. So you need to stay all the way over there with that weird stuff.
Right.
And I think, you know, through then, I mean, it just kind of creates these pseudo identity issues that you don't know are these underlying components that end up becoming building blocks for some people, right? Unless you go back and then re-shatter that foundation and lay new cement. Some people build their infrastructures on this thing.
Yeah.
And you know, the minute there's that one earthquake or the minute there's that one like level of instability, it becomes this, you know, the foundation cracks, you know, and that's when you have things falling out of place. And that's one thing that I thankfully avoided. Not necessarily in the most easy of ways. I moved around a lot as a kid. Not only did we travel a lot, but because of my dad's job, we moved every 7 years. So I was born in New York, but I lived 7 years there. And then I lived 7 years in Austin, Texas. And then I lived which Texas is a completely different thing from New York. Not to say that 7 years old, you're going to understand the ins and outs of how New York sociological, landscape would be. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, wow, it's cold in this place. And there's a lot of people who look like me. And this other place, it's very humid. And me and my Indian friend are walking home from middle school and we just walked underneath the Confederate flag. And I don't know enough about history to understand what that means until later. Right? Because regardless of whatever the situation might look like, we're still in the South. You know, so I found myself in this position where it becomes this much deeper thing, right? And so through that, it became this much more interesting thing that I feel as though I had to learn how to grow with, and had to learn how to be a little bit more understanding and being patient with myself and being patient with my scenario, you know. So that was definitely that piece.
Do you feel like almost liberated and free now because you can be the guy? And like for me, I definitely feel like that. Like I can fully embrace my enjoyment and love for all these eclectic hobbies and interests, from video games to nature to like sustainability to, you know, human science of the body, and that being my profession and field. And then I can still sound and communicate like this, because I've never been to Australia. This is not how normal Australians sound. From like I'm a bit of like a mix. Like some people think English accent, but the American accent. Why you sound like that? Who are you trying to be, right? Like, and I'm just a product of my environment, because I would listen to American artists and entertainment, etc. And so, but now I feel like I can fully be me to a higher level I've never been. Do you feel like that now, or do you still feel like it's a struggle in your environment?
I feel like now it has never been more powerful to be us ever.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel. And that's the way I'm choosing to look at it, whether or not people depict that to be reality or not. I'm looking at it like there are more of us than people think, than even we think. And I think that's what makes a lot of the circumstances we find ourselves in extremely powerful. Because what happens when we speak each other's language? What can be unlocked? What bridges can be built? What bridges can be destroyed? Right? And I think the main component that at least I choose to focus on is, how can I add value to those whom have the understanding and accessibility to derive value?
Yeah.
That does not mean I'm making it extremely unreachable, but there's low hanging fruit versus high hanging fruit. Now, you don't put it impossibly high because there'll be no need for this thing because no one can get to it. But those who put in some level of effort can get to it. And it can weather different seasons, unlike what's rotting on the ground.
Yeah.
That's very accessible, that people can easily pick up out of desperation, potentially. Everyone has their own reasons, and I have no knock towards people who create different levels of content and things like that. It's perfectly fine. So I find myself in a place where, specifically for me, as a personal life choice, what does unapologetic look like sonically? What does unapologetic look like carrying myself generally? Is it me translating and making a conscious choice to say, I'm not going to be crazy tonality on records, inflection Greg times 10, KO Ken times 10 Greg. Like, I could be that guy on this interview, but is it absolutely necessary? Or is it more powerful just to be myself?
Right.
Is it more visceral and is it more unapologetic for me just to be myself during these type of contexts and creating that level of situational awareness?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that is immediately evident to me is how well spoken and articulate you are. And it's...
Thank you, man.
No, seriously. And it's well beyond the average person. And it doesn't even come to skin color. It comes to like human being. And it's like, how did you develop such a astute appreciation for language and communication? Because no one comes out the womb speaking like this. Like, it's developed. It's like crafted, and you have to care about words and reading and poetry and writing and speaking.
I would chalk it up to years of not being heard. And then when you have the capacity to be heard, because now you're like this 6-foot black guy in the room, people are like, we probably should listen to that guy because we don't know what he's capable of. But it turned into this thing where, and this is something that I was learning through the process of like what my upbringing was a little bit more strict, as I'm sure a lot of immigrant parents have, stricter upbringings with their kids. But I was taught to, when you speak, the goal is to say things one time and do one pass, and for there to be no questions. And I think that's something that, you have your standard day jobs, as you're growing up, and let's say you're addressing a coworker or something, and this is something that people might relate to, that, if you're addressing a coworker or something, or they ask you a question, it's not like I described the thing, and then you're like, well, what about this? And you're like, oh, well, that thing, that. And they're like, okay, cool. Well, what about that? Oh, well, that thing, that. Okay, cool. And what about? See, now we just burned X amount of time. So now it's getting into like the business where we're burning hours and resources and things like that. It's something that is maybe not the same approach that people necessarily take when it comes to, conversational, approaches. But for me, it's just one of those things that I've had at one point be a conscious effort. And then it's like rolling steel. I think life is a compounding effect of taking conscious efforts and rolling them into the unconscious to the point where it forms that same level. It's like putting the sword back into the fire, right? We roll another layer of this reinforcement of this. I'm trying to develop this habit. I'm trying to develop this understanding of what I'm trying to say before I say it so often, to the point where I don't even think that I'm being as detailed as I'm being, just because of like how many times you re-put that, you cool and reheat and cool and reheat and cool and reheat. And then when you go out to battle and you chop some other dude's sword in half, you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, I didn't know it was as reinforced as it once was. And so which is interesting because that's actually contradictory to what one might do via record when it comes to metaphor, which is the focus is to ambiguate, right? It's to make it not simple. It's to create those doors and create that level of mystery, right? And that level of mysticism, right? Yeah. And it's like, I'm not trying to also be, super, lyrical, miracle, astronomical, lot of, it's like, I could be that guy.
Yeah.
But I like making music that interests me. And I feel like my days of having to prove things to other people by being the complexion that I am, being the personality that I am, having the interest that I am, as well as many people probably listening to this, we've been conquering and scaling barriers for a long time, silently, consciously, unconsciously. I'm just tired, bro. Like there's things like I'm tired of having to scale barriers being set on me by other people. If I'm going to scale and break things, I'm going to scale and break things that I set for myself. So.
And speaking, like, it's one thing I wanted to actually talk to you about, speaking of barriers, is, you're in California right now, right?
That's correct.
Right. Family's from New York. Born in New York. How do you manage your own habits and sanity and mental health with so much seemingly chaos going around, not only the state you live in, right? Because I heard California is like, is not good, right? You can let me know, right? And then looking at your where your family is, or some of your family is in New York, I assume, which is also not good. Like, how has that been for you? How have you been over this year? Like, what do you take from like this year, Greg? Because I know you probably would have some interesting thoughts on it.
Oh man, this year, I mean, shoot, man, dynamism. Like, what other word comes to mind? Shit show. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of pieces at play on the chessboard, man. Like, but as it relates to me, everyone's being safe. Thankfully, my family's safe as well.
Good.
What keeps me balanced?
Yeah.
Again, and it seems to translate, and I don't want to belabor the repeating aspect of it, but it does kind of, there are a lot of like reflections and refractions of like different things on different categories in my life, but I make things very, very simple. It's like Hey Arnold's closet, right? He opens up his closet and there's all the same shit.
All right.
And with this simplicity, he's able to have mental real estate to take on different things, which is, way beyond the context of what people are going to take from a cartoon, but I'm just weird in the cycle of that. So, because of that, and this is after the fact. I'm not sitting here at like 14 watching Arnold, or 7, whatever, right. Being like, oh, this makes sense, statistically, but but no, it's one of those things where I look back and I'm like, okay, if I again divide everything by 0 and say, what resources and tools do I need to be the most effective artist possible, to create the project that I need to create, to be able to break into the industry that I think has a gap in the market for someone like me, and has a level of high marketability for somebody like me. What creates the highest resonance of artists, So it's just personal disciplinary choices that I think could benefit it. Like on tour, if I'm going to go on tour, not if, switching up language, if, when, possiblies and potentials, and all that has got to go.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
And that's obviously something you still see me working on. Yeah. But what's in scope is when I'm on tour for 2 years straight, because things are incredibly monstrous in terms of the trajectory that we're on. A lot of people's bodies give out. a lot of people's health diminishes.
Yeah.
So what can I do today to reinforce my body? Does that mean running, going to the gym, powerlifting, nutrition? It means all those things.
Yeah.
Right. So knowing that from the jump, where do I put myself in a position in terms of setting myself up for success to get ahead of this thing? So everyone has their own personal choice. It's just for me personally, you know, and I just find myself in a place where I personally don't smoke or drink or anything like that. Everybody has their own things that they're into. My method to my madness is like, if I can't pull this off in terms of leaving the day job, being a full-time artist, a successful artist, and I'll define success by my own metrics, as everyone should define success by their own metrics. But if I can't pull this shit off with 100% of my brain power, it's probably not going to happen. Now, some people have this crazy affinity where they can take 3 shots and go on stage and destroy an absolute show and do that 300 times. I don't have that superpower. It's the same thing as knowing what superpowers you have and what superpowers you don't have. I don't have the capability of with my hyper asthmatic, high BPM, I just can't find myself. And it's like, yeah, for sure, I just did these things. Now, you know, everyone has their thing, and I respect everyone's discipline, and I respect everyone's, you know, approach. And it's not to say, you know, when some of these huge victories are achieved that, you know, yeah, you know, maybe I can go ahead and live it up and have those fun moments then.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's what does it for me is discipline and kind of regimen. And it's being militant about it and being relentless about it and being unyielding. It's saying, hey, you made a decision, just do it. Do it and surprise yourself. Now do it again. Now do it 400 more times.
Yeah.
And to the point where surprising yourself seems so wildly insurmountable that you know you're setting your goals at the right place.
What is that for you now? Like, is that just the habits you have day to day? Is that music you're working on? Is that just making sure you're exercising every day? Meditating? What is that?
Yeah, so what it is more specifically is, which is probably your initial question. You see how I did that? You see how I just danced around? I danced around the thing. I did see.
And we get to it.
Yeah. So to pull it back down, it's simply routine. You know, wake up in the morning, make my bed.
Yeah.
Put on a podcast, handle the morning stuff. You know, listen to something constructive. Listen to something that gets the gears turning.
I'm gonna take a detour. What are you listening to? Podcasts? Like what are you absorbing? What has got your piqued your interest?
So I would say as of late, the pop. Well, it's funny I mentioned podcasts, but I'm listening to actually an audiobook right now, and the audiobook is Andrew Yang, The War on Normal People, I believe is the name.
I didn't know Andrew Yang had a book. Huh.
Yeah, yes, yeah. And it's actually great because I like information that I just like. I'm like a sponge. So what I noticed early on is that when I have certain friends, I act like those friends. When I'm around certain things, I act like those things.
Yeah.
I walk and talk and breathe and do these certain things. So I kind of make it a priority to soak as much information, as relevant or irrelevant as it might be, to the exact moment or to the exact task. It's just, I don't know why I need to know anything about what is going on with this exploration, with this thing and this specific, what's going on in the tundra right now, what's going on in Ethiopia with it's just, I'm one of those people who I just always want to hear and digest things. And it's just packed in the subconscious. It's packed in the subconscious. And then it becomes this thing later on, and we can draw and pull from that. But what was getting me through was listening to that. So I'm going through one chapter per morning, you know, and just soaking. to be honest. And so that kind of just gets my gear started. You know, you get your coffee or your tea or whatever in the morning for the day.
Before we keep going, how do you manage that overwhelm? Because I'm very similar, where I love learning and I have a lot of inputs, and my girlfriend has described my brain as like, you know, those Japanese bullet trains where they just stuff people in, right? I feel like that is my brain with information. Just stuff them in, and just some other stuff gets pushed to the back, whatever. And it's tough for me sometimes, like trying to, you know, all this input. How do you, and it's interesting shit, right? Like, I love learning about space and astronomy. It's like, but for you, it's, you got your own stuff. Like, how do you manage that?
I feel like man, my goodness, that's a great question. Cause this is going to sound probably problematic, but I think I don't have, I don't think I managed it all.
Yeah. Right. I don't know if I have an answer either.
Yeah, I think things just slip off into the abyss, and then it's like my mind's a browser.
Yeah,
like,
tabs.
And I just have 300 tabs.
Oh, bro.
Okay. Well, I'm probably not going to get to tab 297, but eventually we'll
go get there.
You know, or maybe I just have to hit the X and hit close all tabs and start over. You know, but it's just like one of those things where I don't think I have a handle on that right now. I think it's more of like, hey, yes, we can kind of go off the myriad of, you know, and it's nice to know a lot of information, but I think, again, it goes back to the idea of like, okay, let's just, you know, okay, you super smart, dumb person.
Yeah.
Like to the point where it's like, you know, you make things so complex, it's like, you realize you're actually being stupid right now. Like, that's what I tell myself. Like, you realize you're so smart, you're dumb. But it's taking all that information and saying, okay, just make it, the focus is to make the communication between yourself I'll just say it this way. For an artist, depending upon what their authorial intention is, or their intention is going into the work that they're working to convey, the objective may be, and probably is for most artists, except probably, you know, a Picasso or like a, you know, Basquiat, or like some of these abstract kind of folks who choose to ambiguate as opposed to disambiguate. But the idea is to create a communication that's one-to-one, right? So something linear to the point where someone can pick up something, like, for instance, what we're mentioning about Drake, you know, it's like when you listen to it, you know exactly what he's talking about, because he's not sitting here and weaving it in this super complex, I don't know how to undo this knot. This is crazy. He's making it very tangible. And so he's really, one of his superpowers, and one of those my player check 99 boxes that Drake has on, is the ability to create one-to-one language with his audience. And that's one thing that attributes to his success, and it attributes to his stopping power and staying power. So I believe that taking things and saying, hey, all this information is great, I need to follow the small list that I'm compiling that should be 5, maybe 6 things, but just there's a small list of things that are non-negotiable that I need to hit. So, okay, cool. Wake up in the morning, boom. I make sure that the place looks the way I found it. Cool. And now the next goal is I have to go to the gym today. Cool. I got to go knock that out. Boom. I go to the gym. I finish that. Awesome. Cool. Now I want to write this. I want to make some attempt to chip away at the marble that is this record. That doesn't mean I have to write a whole song in one sitting, but it does mean that I have the idea of, I want to take a step in this direction. Do something creative every day, right? Do something creative in this direction every day, so that we still can keep the fire alive to persist in this direction. So that's where I find are some of the main checklist things that I want to take care of. And it's also personal life. Call your family, call your loved ones, take care of your personal relationships, take care of, call your best friend, have those personal karma building, spirit building kind of things. Because a 10, 15-minute conversation could have you feel like, man, I feel way better about that. And I have a lot of friends that, or I have a couple friends that are really, 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 really killing things right now. And it makes me nothing but motivated, to allude back to when I was pacing with this guy in this class when I first thought I couldn't do things. It's this, how do I pace sonically? This guy's killing me. Spotify, streams, videos, this guy's killing me. Sonically, streams, videos, opportunities. Okay, so I'm not them, they're not me. I don't have their resources, they don't have my resources. But how do I add value back into this pot? What information is relevant to augment the mission? Don't deviate from the mission. Because regardless of all the other variables, we still need to get the shuttle on Mars. So how are we finna do that?
And, you know, there's a reason I follow 0 people on social media now. And that is because I was looking, and this is a flaw within myself, or maybe not a flaw, it depends how you look at it. I was looking at other people, and I think like artists and people can get trapped in that sense. You look at other people, you see what they have, and you have to catch yourself because, you know, that jealousy and envy and other emotions can bubble up, and it can really distract from the mission.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you feel that? Actually,
I would say, good.
Well, no, I was trying to pull up a quote that, you know, jealousy is the map of where you want to be. Now, yeah, and that just made me think of it.
I think that's powerful. I think it's definitely something that's relevant as well. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that, you know, you see certain opportunities happen for other people and it's like, oh man, it's crazy. You might have that one immediate flurry of like, whoa, this is very surprising. What do they have? What do I not have? This and that. And you start, you know, weighing things, but it's like, you know, it's apples and oranges. You're a fork, you're a spoon, you're a knife. You guys do different things.
Yeah.
You're all in the same drawer. So it seems as though it's relevant. You're all cutlery and you're all on the same table and people are utilizing you, but you all serve different purposes. So does a knife feel a certain way because a fork is being used this way? You know what I mean? So it's like,
interesting.
I kind of look at it from the perspective of, just because people are going to look at what I'm doing and they're going to say, I might not listen to Greg Newman because it's too rough. I might not listen to Greg Newman because it's too this or it's too that. Or, you know, and on the other side of the spectrum, and this is really for any artist, you know, or any podcaster or any creator or any comedian or whoever. It's like, oh man, so many people appreciate this artist, they're overrated. You know, it's like, how many times are we going to see, like, it's like people talk about, you know, I was seeing something like on Twitter years ago where it's like, oh, Kendrick's overrated. And it's like, well, I think he worked pretty hard for where he's at, you know, much like a lot of other people who work pretty hard for where they make it too. So in a way, it's really up to the eye of the beholder. And that's why I kind of had to really do the full ego death thing of making things really simple for me and saying, hey, yes, there are certain people who might seem as though have this certain kinetic energy to them, but that does not mean that you don't also have that potential to kinetic energy. It's just that transmutation needs to be the main focus. It's that Full Metal Alchemist, we still got to convert this thing, right? Just because they have their thing, that's cool. But guess what? You have your thing and I have my thing and they have their thing. So, you know, people, this is a story that a lot of artists talk about in a lot of different records, but it's like, yo, I've seen so-and-so like blow up. And then, you know, let's say that it doesn't go the way they expect it to go, or they sign a wrong deal, or they don't have the certain experiences, that, or they don't have the right people around them, or it's just, they don't have those interpersonal relationships and respect for other people. And so there's so many different ways things can also diminish as well as ascend. So in a way, those people may not have the same ethics as you. And that's why I don't really try to sweat it too much. It's more of like, I don't mind following folks because I'm like, as long as I know the homies and the friends and the people I've met thus far are doing okay, I was okay. Dude dropped the song, bet he's still on his shit. Cool, boom. You get a like. Cool. Oh, so and so's doing this. Cool. Yeah, you're still on the grind. You haven't given up. Good shit. You know. So in a way, I don't. It's taken time to get to that place for sure. There's no question. I didn't arrive there. You know. But it's like, it takes time to be in a place where it's like, man, I don't feel I'm not connecting your capabilities with my capabilities. Because to be honest, I don't know y'all like to that degree in which we would love to think I can't see anyone's whole hand. You know whose whole hand I can see? Mine.
Yeah.
I can see 4 out of 5 cards, but that last card could change everything. Like,
and people only want to share the cards that they want, like on social media, right? So that's
it's real.
You always lose.
It's real. It's real. And the thing is, like, you know, it is this. There is this, again, game aspect to it, and that's why the main thing I put on myself. Not the main thing, because I've said that multiple times, but another main characteristic I put on as another layer is that don't do yourself the disservice of playing anyone else's game except yourself.
Yeah.
Play your game.
You run your race.
Once you run your race.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm not Usain Bolt. I'm not Johan Blake.
Yeah. But
so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so are me. So, you know, someone's getting torched in this moment. It's just like, at the end of the day, you know, I have to understand that I also have things to bring to the table, and I need to know what my superpowers are. If I understand my superpowers to the highest degree, then at that point, some people might say my superpower is whack. Yeah, I might not be able to fly. Yeah, I might not have laser beam eyes. Yeah, I might not have the utility belt with the whatever. But it's like, I have my thing. And as long as I use my thing to the maximum resonance and do what I have to do, then you know, maybe I can make life better for one person.
Absolutely.
And that's cool, man. That's cool, because there's a period of time where, you know, I'm sure much like yourself, you know, or much like myself, I felt invisible for the longest time and no one knew it. Right? I was one of my superpowers at that time was hiding it.
Yeah.
And I think now, being in a place where it's like my radar is calibrated so sensitively that I can immediately see and notice when someone is like me. And it's a beautiful thing, because then I can have that potential opportunity to uplift that person.
Yeah.
Or at least let them know that they're the shit, regardless if they feel that way or they don't.
Is that your superpower or one of your superpowers? Like, what is that for you? What are they?
I think that might, you know, I feel great making other people feel great. I feel great giving other people the backdrop, planting the seed of the idea that makes them feel like, yo, like, me, nothing is standing in between me and the destination. I'm going to go over this mountain, around this mountain, or I'm going to take this spoon and I'm going to dig the fuck through this mountain if I have to.
Yeah.
Like, it's giving them the strength to say, like, I'm getting to where I'm going to get to. Yeah. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm not trying to railroad people. I'm not trying to take advantage of people. I'm not trying to get there through deceit. But at the same time, understand that it's not delicate out here. Understand that mountains and valleys are formed, and we can appreciate these beautiful structures, but plate tectonics have to shift and crack, and things are going to have to die for these other things to live. So, Kendrick line, since it's relevant, you know, when you fight, don't fight fair, because you'll never win.
That's
period.
Section
80.
And
you not fighting, Section 80. Yeah. Facts. If you fight, don't fight fair, because you'll never win. So what's not fighting fair? Not fighting fair is using the superpowers bestowed upon you, because that was the gift that you were given. You know, other people can speak the dolphins or whatever that Aquaman can, but at the same time, I'm sure Bruce Wayne in the Justice League, like,
he's cool.
He's cool on money, but he's just like, imagine how much of an ego death he's had to have. He's like, okay, so you said infinity gauntlets, like, so you can deflect bullets with your wrists. Okay. Like, it's like, okay, and you can, it's like you can run faster than you can break sound barriers with your feet.
Interesting.
It's knowing that, you know, this is my gift, and me not fighting fair is utilizing what I have in unique ways and creating those different pockets and opportunities. So, man, that's my piece.
That is, I almost want to like drop the mic and end it right there. That's a beautiful way to close this conversation. Oh, Greg, we could speak for hours, man.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
But I want to be respectful of your time, and but
I appreciate that.
music wise, what's on the radar for you this year, music wise, single wise? I know albums for you, it's got to be right. You're not going to force an album out, but what can we expect?
That's a great question.
What do you got cooking? You want to play something? You got anything?
That's a great question. I don't know if I can play anything right now. I'm gonna definitely send you something. So don't worry about that. But
appreciate it.
I know that there was a lot of filtration that needed to take place in my life, internally and externally, hence the low output, which for me is unacceptable, right? Again, much like yourself and much like I'm sure a lot of people listening, who all are going through really different versions of the same thing, I know what it takes to be able to get to that next level. I understand that dropping one record every however many months, once a year, is unacceptable. I'm not in a position where I can go Frank Ocean right now.
Right.
There's just no question, right? And regardless of how the record sounds, how crazy it is, right? It's just unacceptable. So I had to tell myself the truth, which is, if you don't hit F5 on your mentality, on identifying where the areas of opportunity are, then you won't be in a position where you can do the things that you set out to do initially. So understand that if you want this thing, go to a place where there's more light. Understand that if you want this thing, you're going to have to take it to a completely different level. And if your intention is to take it to that next level, you need to make up for lost time.
Okay.
You have to do more. So to answer your question, to be more direct, it's the premise of, right now I'm working on a collection of songs that are sounding a lot like a project.
Oh, hello.
And it feels great. It is me authentically. It's truthful. It's honest. It's, at the same time, it's the next level of what I think things should have been. But I'm not worried about what things should have been. I'm focused on what things are.
Yeah.
Right. It's being in the present and leaning into the future. And my main focus is making up for lost time.
Okay.
So it's, I've been walking at a certain pace, and it's time to run.
Yeah.
Right. And it's time and the time is really yesterday.
Yeah.
So the focus right now is completing the project I'm working on. I have a session tonight, a couple hours, to work to start putting in these pieces and making these songs make sense in the context of a body of work. And then shop around, and then make sure that I have the right team around me, because I cannot do it. There's going to have to be more components to this thing in order for it to hit on the level that it needs to hit. And there's other organic, less damaging ways to do that I'm reaching for. And it all starts, at least for me, from my genuine perspective, I believe it all starts with the music and ends with the music, right? So people can once I bring this project to certain folks, I'm excited to see how they feel about it, what they derive from it, and then from there attract the right people. From what I'm saying, from the way it's sounding, from the potential energy being converted into kinetic energy, and how much potential energy is still untapped when it comes to brand identity, when it comes to brand focus, when it comes to where things can go. So, project is definitely on the way, and I'm I'm feeling great about it, man.
I can't wait to hear it, man. I can see where this is going, man. I think your future is incredibly bright, and I'm so glad to even be able to have this conversation with you, and you take the time.
Likewise.
I can't wait. We can do this in person. I know it might be a while, when we can travel.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's definitely gonna be one of my main stops. No question, man.
Awesome, man.
No question. You can hit me up anytime.
I will, man. When I'm in Cali, of course.
For sure.
Do you have any last thoughts, asks of the people listening, or just where people can find you? Where do you want to direct people? If someone hasn't heard a track of you, where are you sending them?
I'm gonna send them "Stay Down."
Stay Down,
which is a record. "Stay Down" is a great introduction to who Greg Newman is, because it's about the contradictory aspect that some might not see when they initially come across me, which is being consistent with not only the people who are around you, but being consistent with yourself. When you're saying, hey, you stay down for the cause, right? Stay down for the premise of where we're going to be and where we are currently. We should also speak to ourselves and say, don't give up on me just yet. So "Stay Down" would be the perfect starting point. And then if you want to lift 300 pounds and do a crazy deadlift, you know what I mean? And do a bunch of, you can listen to Forecast too, I guess. Of course,
I guess. Bro, I got a playlist called War, right? War is when I go to war with myself physically, mentally.
You said war?
War. I'm going to war, Greg. And that motherfucker's in there. You bet.
I love it, man. I love it. That's great. That's great.
Greg, where can people find you? Go ahead.
Yeah. People can find me at GREGNWMN. Greg Newman is the way that's pronounced. One word, Greg Newman. Really everywhere. You can Google it, and it's gonna pop up everything that I've done. But on your preferred social, on your preferred listening platform, it's Greg Newman, GREGNWMN on every single platform. Reach out to me, hit me up. Let me know what record you came across first. Let me know, how you feel about it. Let's talk about it. Let's expand on it. And I really appreciate your time. And this is, this has been a great conversation. So this is definitely a highlight to my evening.
Absolutely. It's a highlight to my day too, man. I'll let you go. Thank you so much for taking the time, Greg. Much love. Stay well.
Yeah, anytime. Peace. Take care of yourself.
From the jump, I'll admit, push and drop, have to drop, till y'all know that I exist. And I'ma blow, and I'ma pop, y'all can't possibly depict. And I'm gonna probably take risks, and I'm gonna die before I quit. I gotta take action to get stagnant, and they stopping it. Too many been passive, and they lost it. The rappers, I move backwards, and they honest. Hacking the right back, and to make profit, and accurate, new acumen makes options. Meaning the accountant can be